find her.
Maria?
She's missing from the Abbey again.
Perhaps we should have put a cowbell around her neck.
I have looked everywhere, in all of the usual places.
Considering that it's Maria, I suggest you look in someplace.
When audiences think of the sound of music, they picture sweeping hills, cheerful songs, and the wholesome charm of Julie Andrews leading a troop of children in harmony. For decades, it has been celebrated as one of the most uplifting films in Hollywood history, a family-friendly masterpiece that continues to inspire generation after generation. But what if I told you that behind the dazzling smiles and joyful melodies, there was a scene so dark, so unsettling, that the cast was ordered never to talk about it? Yes, you heard that right. Hidden deep within the making of this beloved classic lies a forbidden moment, one that could have completely changed how the world remembers the sound of music. It wasn't a harmless blooper, nor a light-hearted deleted scene. It was something the studio feared would ruin the film's carefully crafted image. And so, it was cut, buried, and silenced for decades. The whispers of this mysterious sequence have haunted film historians for years. The child actors hinted at being frightened on set. Christopher Plummer expressed frustration about how the story was softened. And scattered evidence suggests the scene wasn't just imagined, it was real. Yet, for more than half a century, fans were kept in the dark. So what exactly happened during this forbidden moment? Why was it erased from history? And why were the cast and crew pressured into silence? Let's uncover the shocking truth Hollywood didn't want you to know. Few films in cinematic history have reached the level of universal adoration that The Sound of Music enjoys. Released in 1965, this Rodgers and Hammerstein masterpiece became much more than a musical. It was a cultural phenomenon that captured the hearts of millions. Julie Andrews' portrayal of Maria, the optimistic governess who brings joy and music back to the Von Trapp family, remains etched into film history. With breathtaking scenery, unforgettable songs, and themes of hope against a backdrop of looming war, the movie seemed flawless in every way. Yet, beneath the surface of its polished production lies a mystery that cast members have whispered about for decades. A moment so controversial, it was almost erased from memory. When audiences watch The Sound of Music, they see perfection, children singing in harmony, Julie Andrews twirling in the Austrian hills, and Christopher Plummer's stoic yet tender Captain Von Trapp. But what they don't see is the behind-the-scenes tension that brewed during filming. While most movie sets have their share of mishaps, rumors, and disagreements, this film carried something deeper. There was one particular scene that insiders claim carried so much weight and controversy that the cast was discouraged from speaking about it publicly. Over the years, hints have surfaced through interviews, memoirs, and offhand remarks, but Hollywood's golden gloss has kept the truth carefully concealed. To understand why such secrecy existed, one must look back at the time the movie was filmed. The 1960s were an era of strict moral standards in Hollywood. The motion picture production code still influenced what could and could not be shown on screen. Studios were cautious about anything that could spark outrage, especially in a film marketed as wholesome family entertainment. The Sound of Music was designed to appeal to every generation, parents, children, and even grandparents. So any element that might disrupt that image had to be carefully controlled or buried altogether. According to several cast members, the scene in question wasn't something minor like a costume mishap or a forgotten line. It was something that, if revealed, could have altered how the world perceived this iconic film. While Julie Andrews often spoke fondly of her time on set, she also once mentioned in an interview that there were moments best left in the past. Christopher Plummer, who famously referred to the film as The Sound of Mucus because of his mixed feelings about its sugary tone, dropped cryptic hints about difficult days during production. For years, fans assumed he was only frustrated with the overly sentimental nature of the story. But insiders suggest his comments were linked to the forbidden moment. Why? Then, would an entire cast and crew be silenced about a single scene? Hollywood insiders believe it was due to a clash between artistic vision and the strict cultural expectations of the time. Director Robert Wise was a master craftsman, determined to balance authenticity with universal appeal. Filming in Salzburg, Austria, with local extras and the weight of World War II history still looming large, meant the production occasionally bumped into uncomfortable truths. Some of these realities reportedly made their way into one particular scene, a scene that executives later deemed far too controversial to keep. The studio demanded silence, ensuring no one involved would openly discuss it. Whispers suggest that the scene carried undertones far darker than anything else in the movie. While the final cut shows the Von Trapp family bravely escaping across the mountains, early versions of the script included moments that reflected more brutal realities of Nazi-occupied Austria. Certain depictions, too raw, too painful, were reportedly filmed only to be edited out. The surviving cast members who were children at the time have occasionally alluded to being shaken by moments they didn't fully understand while shooting. As adults, they carefully dodged direct questions about it, almost as though bound by an unspoken code of silence. The existence of such a scene raises questions. Was it a deliberate choice to protect audiences from harsh truths? Or was it an attempt to shield the film's reputation as a feel-good classic? Perhaps it was both. Hollywood in the 1960s prioritized escapism, and a stark reminder of real-world horrors might have clashed with the hopeful story audiences craved. Still, the fact that cast members were reportedly told never to bring it up, even decades later, suggests it carried more weight than a simple deleted scene. This mystery has only fueled fan speculation over the years. Dedicated film historians have tried to piece together scraps of information, examining production notes, comparing early drafts of the script, and even interviewing locals who witnessed the filming. Some claim the truth lies locked away in studio vaults, while others insist the scene was destroyed altogether. What remains undeniable is the aura of secrecy. Even in retrospectives celebrating the film's anniversaries, where cast members reunite to reminisce, there's a sense that something has been carefully left unsaid. The magic of the sound of music remains untouched on screen, but behind that magic is a story the world was never meant to see, and for decades, the cast carried that burden in silence. As beautiful as the sound of music appeared to audiences, the truth is that one particular sequence nearly shattered its wholesome image. In early drafts of the film, there was a scene that attempted to show just how dangerous life had become in Austria under Nazi rule. Robert Wise, known for his boldness as a filmmaker, wanted to ground the story with more historical authenticity. His vision was to balance the light-hearted music with a reminder of the darker world looming outside the Von Trapp villa. According to crew members and scattered production notes, this infamous scene was filmed but never released. It reportedly depicted a chilling confrontation between Nazi soldiers and the Von Trapp children. Unlike the cheerful, innocent moments we remember, the puppet show, the do-re-mi song, and the children in curtain clothes, this moment painted them as vulnerable targets of war. Soldiers were said to have stormed into a Salzburg square where the children were singing. What began as a performance turned into an intimidating standoff, with the soldiers mocking, interrupting, and even threatening the group. Julie Andrews later hinted in vague terms that the children had been made uncomfortable during filming of certain sequences. While she didn't name this specific moment, insiders believe she was referring to this lost scene. The young cast, some barely in their teens, allegedly found the soldiers' performance frightening. Even though they were actors, the uniforms, the shouting, and the aggression felt disturbingly real to them. For the adult crew, the decision to put children in such a heavy situation was controversial. Some argued it gave the film needed weight, while others insisted it was inappropriate and would ruin the family-friendly tone. When studio executives in Hollywood saw the dailies, raw, unedited footage, their reaction was immediate. They believed the scene crossed a line. This was not the sound of music they had promised audiences. Instead of uplifting inspiration, it injected fear and discomfort. Worse still, executives feared that depicting Nazis in such a raw manner might spark political backlash at the height of Cold War sensitivities. Though the film was about the 1930s, any depiction of totalitarian cruelty carried modern implications. The studio, determined to avoid controversy, ordered the scene cut from the final version, but cutting it wasn't enough. Executives reportedly went further, instructing the cast and crew never to publicly acknowledge its existence. The reasoning was simple. The studio wanted audiences to remember The Sound of Music as pure magic, not as a film that flirted with darkness. This policy of silence created the forbidden aura around the sequence. Christopher Plummer, who played Captain Von Trapp, may have been one of the few who openly bristled at this censorship. Known for his disdain of the film's overly sentimental tone, Plummer allegedly argued that cutting the darker moment made the story less authentic. To him, the Von Trapp family's real-life escape was steeped in danger and oppression, not just love songs and mountain hikes. Though he never confirmed the details, Plummer's cryptic comments over the years fueled speculation about what had been lost. The children in the cast also carried memories of it. Charmian Carr, who played Liesel, once mentioned in her memoir that certain days of filming were far more difficult than the audience could ever imagine. She never elaborated, but some fans believe she was hinting at this unsettling scene. Decades later, other child actors also admitted they occasionally felt scared while filming, though they stopped short of describing why. Whether bound by non-disclosure agreements or loyalty to the film's legacy, they chose silence. What makes this mystery even more compelling is that fragments of the sequence may still exist. Film historians point to rare photographs taken on set showing the Von Trapp children surrounded by extras in Nazi uniforms. These images, though never officially released by the studio, surfaced in private collections and auctions. They provide tantalizing evidence that something significant was indeed filmed, even if the footage itself was locked away or destroyed. Why was it considered so dangerous? The answer lies in the expectations of the time. In the 1960s, musicals were escapist entertainment. Families flocked to theaters to be uplifted, not confronted with harsh political realities. Studios feared backlash from parents who might claim the film was traumatizing for children. At a time when Hollywood carefully balanced profitability with public image, executives weren't willing to risk anything, even if it meant erasing part of the director's vision. And so, the forbidden scene became a ghost in the film's history, a sequence whispered about but never shown. Those who were there carried the memory, while audiences were left with only the polished version of The Sound of Music. For decades, this gap between what was filmed and what was revealed has fascinated fans, critics, and historians alike. The irony is striking. A movie about courage, truth, and standing up against oppression was itself forced to bury one of its most honest moments. The silence surrounding this scene reveals as much about Hollywood's priorities as it does about the story itself. When The Sound of Music hit theaters in 1965, the world embraced it as a beacon of joy and innocence. To the public, the Von Trapp children seemed forever frozen in time, smiling, singing, and twirling through Salzburg. But for the cast who lived behind the cameras, the memory of the forbidden scene never faded. Even though the studio had ordered it buried, the emotional weight of filming it stayed with them for decades. For the child actors, the experience was particularly unsettling. Debbie Turner, who played Marta, later admitted in interviews that some days on set felt overwhelming. She didn't specify what she meant, but those who have pieced together the timeline believe she was referring to the sequence involving Nazi soldiers. For young performers, being surrounded by shouting adults in menacing uniforms blurred the line between play acting and reality. Some reportedly broke down in tears during filming, unable to process why their characters, who were always safe and joyful, were suddenly thrust into a terrifying confrontation. Julie Andrews, who became the film's heart and soul, quietly carried her own discomfort. While she always spoke glowingly of the cast and crew, Andrews occasionally hinted that not every moment was as perfect as audiences believed. During one promotional event years later, she remarked that the children were far braver than anyone gave them credit for. It was an offhand comment, but to insiders, it seemed to acknowledge the pressure placed on them during those darker days of filming. Christopher Plummer, never shy about voicing his complicated feelings toward the film, went even further. He openly complained that The Sound of Music was too saccharine, too sanitized. While he never described the forbidden sequence in detail, he often lamented that the story avoided the real dangers faced by the Von Trapp family. Fans who followed his comments closely suspect he was alluding to the scene that the studio ordered destroyed. For Plummer, cutting it wasn't just an artistic decision, it was a betrayal of authenticity. The pressure to remain silent came directly from the studio. 20th Century Fox, already facing financial risks after costly productions, wasn't about to gamble on controversy. The cast was strongly advised not to speak publicly about the deleted material. While not quite a gag order, the instructions were clear. The film's image depended on keeping certain details hidden. Breaking that silence could have jeopardized careers, reputations, and even the film's box office success. And so, the actors played along. Whenever interviews circled around difficult days of filming, they carefully avoided specifics. When fans asked if there were deleted scenes, the cast usually gave vague answers or steered the conversation back to lighter memories. This silence wasn't just obedience, it was also protection. Many of the child actors grew up with the fear that speaking about it would reflect poorly on them or their families. Over time, silence became habit. By the 1970s and 1980s, The Sound of Music had taken on a life of its own as a cultural treasure. The last thing the cast wanted was to tarnish its reputation. After all, millions of fans adored the film for its purity and warmth. Why risk shattering that illusion by digging up a painful memory that might confuse or upset them? Still, traces of the forbidden sequence occasionally slipped through the cracks. In memoirs, cast members mentioned challenging days without elaboration. In documentaries, they spoke about feeling scared but stopped short of explaining why. These fragments only deepened the mystery, leaving fans to speculate about what really happened. Historians argue that the silence reveals the immense pressure of Hollywood during that era. Stars weren't just actors. They were guardians of the studio's image. Talking openly about behind-the-scenes struggles was seen as disloyal, even dangerous. And for a film as important to the studio's survival as The Sound of Music, keeping secrets was considered part of the job. What's striking is how the silence also bonded the cast together. They had lived through something unsettling that audiences could never fully understand. In their reunions over the years, there was often an unspoken understanding. They shared a memory that would never make it into the official story. Whether it was guilt, fear, or simply respect for the film's legacy, they carried the weight of that lost moment together. Decades later, when asked about regrets, several cast members admitted that while they loved the film's success, not everything about filming was easy. None of them openly named the forbidden scene. But the subtext was clear. There was more to The Sound of Music than audiences had ever been told. In the end, their silence wasn't just about following studio orders. It was about protecting the film's place in history. For better or worse, the actors chose to preserve the illusion, even if it meant burying part of their own story. But as time passed and the truth began to leak out, it became impossible to keep the secret forever. For decades, the whispers about a forbidden scene from The Sound of Music floated through Hollywood circles like smoke from a fire no one could quite locate. Fans speculated endlessly, journalists hinted at secrets, and film historians scoured archives for evidence. Still, nothing concrete emerged, until bits of truth began to surface years later. The first breakthrough came when behind-the-scenes still photographs leaked through private collectors. In them, the Von Trapp children appeared surrounded by extras dressed as Nazi soldiers, their expressions noticeably more somber than in any other scene. These images did not match any moment in the released film. For historians, the photos were confirmation that the darker sequence was indeed real, not just rumor. Later, fragments of production notes surfaced in auction houses. One memo from a Fox executive instructed editors to remove all sequences that may cause distress to family, audiences. Another noted strong concerns about child actors in extended confrontation scenes. While the memos didn't spell out exact details, their implications were obvious. The studio knew the scene had been filmed, and they were determined to bury it. By the 1990s, when The Sound of Music celebrated its 30th anniversary, Questions about lost footage resurfaced during press tours. Julie Andrews, always careful with her words, admitted that some heavier material had been cut, though she downplayed it. Christopher Plummer, in contrast, grew bolder. In interviews, he hinted that certain scenes would have given the story more grit but were deemed too much for audiences. While he never named the sequence outright, his frustration made it clear that the cuts had bothered him for years.